Hello everyone and welcome to this new video of Deep in Politics. So today we'll be studying and analyzing together the 2020 presidential election result of the state of Wisconsin. So Wisconsin, alongside with Pennsylvania and Michigan, form the so-called Blue Wall. These three states are called the Blue Wall because the Democrats were able to win the election in the last 2 decades at each and every election in these three states. However, President Trump in 2016 was able to end this streak as he was able to flip these three states and turn them into a red wall. However, President Biden, as you see here in the map, was able to rebuild this blue wall even though he did it by a very small margin. So as we said, the Democrats were very dominant in the state of Wisconsin, since 1988. So as you see here, they were able to win each and every election since 1988 until 2016. In 2016, President Trump was able to flip the state and to win it by a small margin of 0.7%. However, President Biden was able to retake the state for the Democrat in the 2020 election as he was able to win the election by 0.7 also. So as you see, even though the Democrats were able to retake this state, they only did it by a very small margin, which shows that the Republicans are really closing the gap here and that they are really close to flip this state again after doing it in 2016. And as you will see in the end of the video, I do think that this state will lean more to the Republican than to the Democrat in the upcoming elections. So before entering into the details, I just want you to see how bad the polling industry predicted the election in the state of Wisconsin. As you see here, at the eve of the election, the average polling industry was predicting President Biden to win the state by 8.4%, whereas as you see here, he only won the state by 0.7%, which is a much smaller lead, much smaller gap than what it was predicted. So the polling industry got it very wrong, and I also remember that there was a poll made by CNN that showed that President Biden was going to win the state of Wisconsin by more than 17 points, and this is not what happened at all. So just the idea is that the polling industry was really wrong in the state of Wisconsin, as they were wrong in most of the states of the US. Now, before moving into the details of this election and before analyzing the result, I will just want to give you a general overview of the state of Wisconsin. So the state of Wisconsin is a state that has a population of 5.8 million citizens. It's not a very diversified state, as more than 80% of its population are white population. You have 6% of black population, 7% of Hispanic, and a little bit of Asian. Now moving to the bachelor degree among the adult population of Wisconsin, we see that it's average percentage of 31.3%, so it's a little bit less than the average percentage of the US, which is 33%. So you would expect that all of these data will favor the Republican a little bit, since they do in general better among the white voters base, especially the white rural base. And here, since we have a majority of white voters and somehow small percentage of bachelor degree among the adult population, or it's not a small average, but it's less than the average of the United States. So you would expect the Republican to do good in this state, and indeed they did good. They did way better than expected. They lost. Yes, it's correct that they lost the state, even though they won it in 2016, but they only lost it by a very, very small margin, and this is a big improvement for them because, as we said, this was the worst case scenario for Republican. The worst case scenario was this 2020 election, as everything that happened before the election played against them. However, despite this, they were able to stay strong in a state that was dominated by the Democrat in the last 2 decades. So this is the data that I wanted you to know. Now let's move a little bit to the result of the 2016 election first. We saw that President Trump was able to win the election here in 2016 by a margin of 0.7%, whereas he lost the state by also a margin of 0.7% to President Joe Biden. So still, it's clear that the state of Wisconsin from now on will be a very tough battleground, and that the Democrats really lost the advantage that they had here in the last decades in the state of Wisconsin. So as you see here, I also drew a table as usual. We see that compared to 2016, the Republican gained 1.7% in the general votes, whereas the Democrat gained 3.2%, which enabled the Democrat, or this represents a shift of 1.4% in favor of the Democrat, which enabled them to flip the states and to flip the state and turn it into a blue state after they lost it in 2016. Now, in analyzing this election, we'll proceed as usual. We'll first analyze the result in the small states of the state, in the small counties of the state, and then we'll analyze the result of the big counties. As you would expect, Republicans do better in small counties, whereas it's the Democrat that does better in the big counties. So beginning by the small counties, there is a total of 57 small counties in the state of Wisconsin. In order to see the definition that I give for small counties, you can check my previous videos. So from 57 small counties in Wisconsin, the Republicans were able to win 37, or to improve in 37, whereas the Democrats were able to improve in only 20. So we clearly see that it's the Republican that improved a lot more in these small counties than the Democrat, and this is expected as most of these counties are rural counties. Voters are conservative, and so they tend to vote more for Republican than they do for Democrat. And the main reason is that most of these counties contain white rural voters that are really conservative and that form the stronghold of Republican, not only in the state of Wisconsin, but in all the US. And I've chosen some small counties that we will study together. So we'll begin with the counties where Republican improved. So first you have here Clark County. Let's see some data about Clark County. So Clark County is a county that have a population of around 34.5 thousand US citizens. As you see here, you have a huge majority of white population. They represent almost all the population of this county, around 93%. And as you see here, the average percentage of bachelor degree is very low. It's only 9.6%, so it's about 2/5 of the rate of Wisconsin and the United States. So it's a very low bachelor degree. So the voters here are really conservative, and so you would expect the Republican to improve in this county. And as you see here, they were able to improve. They gained 3.9% in the general result of the county, whereas the Democrat lost 0.5%, which enabled the Republican to extend their lead over the Democrat in this county by 4.4%. And we'll see a similar thing happening in the county of Kewanee. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly. So these are the data of this county. It's a smaller county than Clark. It has a population of around 20,000 American. Once again, we see that white voters represent almost all the population of this county. And as you would expect too, it's a county where you have a small percentage of bachelor degree among its adult people. Yes, it's more than the previous county, but still it's a lot less than the average of Wisconsin and the average of the US. And so you would also expect that the Republican will do good in this county, as they were able to surge even more than 2016 among the category of white, conservative, rural voters. And indeed, this is what happened. We see here that the Republicans were able to gain around 4.2% in the general result, as their score went up from 61.5% to 65.7%, whereas the Democrat lost 0.8% and the result went down from 33.7% to 32.9%, which enabled the Republican to extend their lead in this county by 5% over the Democrat. So that being said, what happened in these two counties that we studied together and what represent what happened in all the small counties of Wisconsin, where you have a majority of white rural voters, of white voters that don't have a bachelor degree. So the Republicans were able to surge even more than 2016 in this category of voters, and this is the main reason that kept them close to the Democrat in this 2020 election. And in my opinion, these category of voters will be the stronghold for Republican if they want to win the state of Wisconsin in any upcoming election. So now let's move to to counties, to small counties where the Democrats were able to improve. So as you would expect, in this county, the percentage of bachelor degree must be a little bit higher, as we saw that the Democrats were able to improve among educated voters, and more especially among white educated voters. So the first small county that I chose where Democrats were able to improve is the county of Bayfield. So as you see here, Bayfield County, let's see some data of Bayfield County. So it's a small county of around 15,000 voters. It's also a county where you have a very important majority of white population. They represent around 85% of the total population. As you see here, the percentage of bachelor degree is high. At least it's higher than the percentage of bachelor degree in the previous county that we already saw. It's even a percentage of bachelor degree that is higher than the average rate of Wisconsin. So you would expect the Democrat to improve a little bit in this county, as we said, they were able to improve among the category of white educated voters, not only in Wisconsin but in all the US. And here, when we compare the result, we see that the Republican lost 0.5% in the total votes, whereas the Democrats were able to improve big in this county, and they were able to gain 5.1%, which enabled them to extend their lead over the Republican by 5.5%. So we see here, as we saw in other counties and even in other states, that the Democrats were able to do very good among the category of white educated voters. And as I said, the main reason is that these category of voters, generally the voters that have a bachelor degree and that went to college, don't like extreme politics. They don't like the far right politics, and we can easily say that President Trump was a far right candidate. And so he lost an important party of white educated voters that usually vote for Republican. Now let's move to Door County. So Door County is also a small county where the Democrats were able to improve. And as we see here, we'll see something similar to Bayfield County. So also it's a county that has a population of less than 30,000 voters. Once again, almost all the population is white population. They represent more than 94% of the total population. And as you see here, it has an important percentage of bachelor degree, as they have an average percentage of bachelor degree of 33.7%. So it's higher than the rate of the US and the rate of Wisconsin. And so you would expect, once again, the Democrat to improve, and this is what happened here. As you see, they were able to gain 4.4% in the general result, whereas the Republican lost 0.2%, which enabled the Democrat, or which represent a shift of 4.6% in favor of the Democrat. So this is what happened in small counties. The Republicans were able to improve in most of these small counties. Their biggest improvement and most of their improvement came in counties where there is a majority of white rural voters, whereas the Democrats, they were able to improve in some small counties. And of course, the main reason was their surge among white educated voters, and so their improvement came from counties where you have a very strong or a very high percentage of bachelor degree. So now let's move to big counties. So as you would expect, Democrats will improve more in these big counties. Let's begin by a chart. As you see here in the chart, the Democrats were able to improve in 11 big counties, whereas the Republicans were able to improve in only 2 such counties, and even in these counties their improvement wasn't that important. So like everywhere else in the US, we see that the Democrats were able to improve big in this county, and this was the main result, or the main reason for them winning the state of Wisconsin, and even winning and improving in most of the states of the US The reason is that this county has a higher percentage of bachelor degree, and so people tend to be more liberal and vote more for the Democrat. So the two counties that I decided to study with you, and that shows the main reason why the Democrats were able to improve in this county, are first the county of Waukesha County. We will see a little bit of data as usual of this county. So it's a county that has a population of around 500,000. So it's a very big. County. You see here that most of the quasi majority of the population of this county are white voters, and so you would expect that this will favor the Republican, because the Republicans tend to do better in all category of white voters generally, of course. But in this election, we saw that they lost among white educated voters. And here you see that the percentage of bachelor degree among this population, or among the population of this county, is very high. It's around 50%. So it's very high. It's more than 1.5 times the rate of Wisconsin, and it's also much higher than the average rate of the US. And so regarding what happened, or taking into consideration what happened in the rest of the states of the US, you would expect the Democrat to improve big here, as they were able to surge importantly among the category of white educated voters. And indeed, this is what happened in this county, as the Republican lost 0.3% in the total votes on the total result of the counties, as a result went down from 60% to 59.7%, whereas the Democrats were able to surge big in this county, and their total result went up from 33.3% to 38.9%, which is a gain of 5.6%, and which represent a shift of 5.9% in favor of them, in favor of the Democrat. And as I always say, a shift of around 6% in a big county, in a county where you have around 300,000 votes casted, is a big shift. It's a much more important shift than a 10% shift in a small counties. And as you see here, the Democrats were able to improve a lot. They were able to gain a lot of votes. They were able to gain around 31% new votes compared to 2016, and this is a big improvement. And most of these votes came from white educated voters that didn't cast their vote in 2016. And most of these new voters didn't necessarily vote for Democrat because they liked Joe Biden, but they voted for him because they couldn't stand the politics of President Trump, which, as we said, was a far-right politics. Now moving to another county, a big county where the Democrat improved a lot, it's Milwaukee County. So this county shows that the Democrat, and unlike precedent states, were able to improve even among minorities, which also enabled them to improve a lot in Milwaukee, unlike what we saw in previous state. In previous state, we saw that in big counties and in all the type of counties, the Republicans were generally able to improve among minorities, and this was unlike what was predicted. But here in Milwaukee, as you see, it's a county that have a big population, a population of around 1 million, so it's 1/5 of the total population of Wisconsin. It's the biggest county of Wisconsin. As you see here, it's a quite diversified county. You have around half the population of Milwaukee County that is formed by minorities. You have 26% of black people, 16% of Hispanic, and 4% of Asian, and the other half of the population of the county are white population. So you see here that it has an average. It has almost the same average as Wisconsin. And so the improvement of Democrats here mainly lie on their surge among the minority voters, especially among black voters. So black voters turned in big numbers in favor of Democrat in this county, unlike what they did in 2016. So as you see here, the Republican lost 1.1% in the general result of the states, whereas Democrats were able to gain 4.2%. And this enabled the Democrat to increase their lead over the Republican by 5.3%, which is a very big improvement and a very big surge when we take into consideration that more than 500,000 citizens cast their vote in the county of Milwaukee. So that being said, it's clear that the main reason for Democrat being able to win this state again is how good they did in big counties, and the reason that they did that good in big counties is their surge among white educated voters. However, I think that the Democrat should have done a lot better than this, because as I always say, the 2020 presidential election was the best case scenario for Democrat. I do not expect them to do as good as this in any upcoming election, especially if the Republican were able to keep their white rural vote base motivated. So the Democrat will lose some votes in the upcoming elections. They will not necessarily lose them to the Republican. As I always say, a big number of people casted their vote in this election against President Trump and not with President Biden, and so these people might not vote in the upcoming election, or some of them might go back and vote for the Republican. And this is bad news for the Democrat, because as we said, they only won the state by a very small margin, by a margin of 0.7%, and I do not think that they will be able to do again this, or to do again this big voter turnout in their favor. And so I do think that in the upcoming election, whereas in the 2022 midterm election, or even in the 2024 presidential election, this state will flip red again. It will go back red, and I think that this time the Republican will able to keep the state red, even if by a small margin. So what we are seeing in the US is that people are migrating from the blue states, from the blue wall states. They are going to other states such as Texas, such as Arizona, such as Florida, and generally, as I say, the people that migrate are generally Democrat, because conservative people, rural voters, rural population tend to be more attached to their land, and so this is favoring the Republican in the state of the blue wall. And so most probably the Republican will continue to improve in the blue wall, and they will able to take, in my opinion, the state of Wisconsin in the upcoming election. However, it will be very interesting to keep an eye on Wisconsin to see what will happen. It will stay a very close state, and the party that will win will only win by a margin, by a very small margin. However, I give the edge for the Republican in any upcoming election in the state of Wisconsin. So that being said, thank you for watching this video. I'll see you in the next video where I will be studying the last state of the blue wall, which is Michigan. Thank you.